The palace corridors stretched endlessly, glimmering with the soft pulse of lights embedded in walls that seemed alive, refracting the stars outside into liquid rainbows that danced across polished floors. The human walked behind the queen, each of his footsteps hesitant, trying not to scuff the reflective surface, though he knew it was hopeless. He had read enough about alien architecture to expect impossible geometry and gravity that played tricks on perception. Yet he still managed to stumble over the slight elevation that separated one corridor from another, prompting a sharp but amused flick of the queen's long ears. "You humans really are clumsy," she said, her voice smooth, tinged with regal authority yet threaded with laughter. "You treat your legs like they're optional accessories. I assume that is part of your mating ritual." He flushed, rubbing the back of his neck. I prefer to think of it as interpretive movement." Her lips curved into a faint smirk. "Interpretive, yes, I can see how that would be terrifying to any alien observer. Especially one who's about to engage in an utterly unconventional act with a human male." The human tried to keep his balance, the walls subtly bending around them as if following their own secret rules. He had been briefed extensively, though no briefing could really prepare him for the scenario. The queen's final wish before a critical surgery was to experience human reproduction. He had expected diplomacy, negotiations, maybe even a ceremonial dinner. This, however, required a level of trust he hadn't anticipated, and the notion of aligning himself so intimately with a being of such immense status made him alternately nervous and incredulous. "I still can't believe this is happening," he muttered. "I mean, you're a queen, a galactic queen, and I'm just, well, me, a very average human male who can't even navigate your corridors without falling over." She laughed, the sound clear and melodic, her long ears flicking forward in delight. "Average, you say? I find that hard to believe. You have survived several awkward introductions, managed to refrain from screaming when my attendants examined your physiology, and you have not yet run screaming from the palace. By my standards, that is exceptional." They reached a chamber at the far end of the palace, a room whose walls were made of panels that shifted color depending on the emotional resonance of those within. At the moment, the panels shimmered soft gold, indicating the queen's calm determination, though with flickers of silver teasing out her amusement. The human's nerves sent tiny pulses of anxious blue through the wall, which she noted with a teasing tilt of her head. "You see that?" she said, pointing subtly at the walls. "They are very honest. They tell me when someone is nervous, though they cannot, unfortunately, warn me when someone is completely out of their depth. That you must detect yourself." "I'm trying," he said, grinning weakly. "But your palace has a way of making a person feel like they're in a gravity simulator designed by drunk architects." "Exactly, you see, humor is useful here. It's the only way to survive my palace without screaming." Her ears twitched, brushing against strands of dark hair that framed her elegant face, human-like in every way except those ears that gave her a slightly otherworldly aura. "And you, my dear human, seem to have a natural knack for it." He let out a breath, letting the tension ease slightly. He had expected sterile formality or perhaps intimidating grandeur. Instead, he found himself in a labyrinth of shimmering surfaces, with a queen whose humor was sharp but warm, and whose command over both her court and herself was undeniable. He wondered for the first time if any of this, her request, her charm, her humor, was designed to test him. Or if she genuinely wanted a human connection, simple and unembellished, before facing the uncertainty of surgery. "Do you ever get bored?" he asked, glancing around at the intricate ceiling which displayed constellations of galaxies in motion, each one rotating in patterns that defied physics as he understood them. "Bored?" she echoed, tilting her head. Her long ears twitched in exaggerated dismay, which made him suppress a laugh. "I have entire fleets at my disposal, diplomacy that spans star systems, and a palace that rearranges itself depending on my mood. Boredom is a human concept, I believe." "You might be right," he said, allowing a small chuckle to escape. "Though I have to admit, your method of keeping guests engaged is extreme." She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, though her smirk never left her face. "Extreme, perhaps, but entertaining? Absolutely. And necessary if one wishes to prepare for a final human experiment before risking one's life on the surgical table." The human swallowed, aware of the gravity behind her words, yet relieved by the levity she maintained. He had prepared himself for scientific lectures, philosophical debates, or perhaps formal rituals of farewell. Humor, however, was a weapon and a shield, and she wielded it effortlessly, making the impossible seem almost normal. "I have to ask," he said, glancing at her ears once more, "do they get in the way?" "Get in the way?" She raised an eyebrow, ears twitching in mock horror. "Oh, my dear, they have their inconveniences. They can catch on the wrong tapestry or accidentally tickle you at the most inconvenient moment, but they are excellent judges of human emotion. They even detect dishonesty or boredom, which in my line of work is worse than a poorly cooked meal." He laughed despite himself, the sound echoing softly in the shimmering corridor. It was impossible not to feel some warmth toward her, the way she balanced power, vulnerability, and humor in a single presence. He realized that whatever lay ahead, whatever unfamiliar steps he might be asked to take, this was a queen unlike any he had imagined. Commanding, fearless, and yet surprisingly human in her desire for connection, for trust, for a last taste of life before the uncertainty of surgery. As the doors of the chamber closed behind them with a soft hiss, he caught the flicker of amusement in her eyes and the twitch of her long ears. In that moment, he knew that whatever they were about to attempt would be awkward, complex, and perhaps unprecedented. But it would be shared, and in the realm of the unknown, that made all the difference. The human had never been so thoroughly examined in his life. Bioengineers hovered in translucent pods, fingers tapping holographic interfaces that projected glowing, floating models of his internal systems. Each pulse of light highlighted nerves, organs, and veins, all rendered in technicolor brilliance, while soft alarms occasionally chimed when the human blinked in confusion or shifted too quickly. The queen stood nearby, regal as ever, her long ears flicking back and forth with each errant beep. "Are they always this dramatic?" the human asked, nodding toward a hologram of his own circulatory system that had just sprouted a tiny animated mustache and waved at him. The queen's lips curved in amusement. "No, usually the holograms behave themselves. Today, however, they are spirited. Perhaps they sense the importance of the task." Her eyes glimmered. "Or perhaps they simply enjoy mocking humans." The human groaned, "I think it's a little of both." She laughed, a light, airy sound that seemed to make the pods vibrate in delight. "You see, humor is vital here. If we took this all too seriously, it would be unbearable. And we would probably create something catastrophic rather than beautiful." He followed her as she led him deeper into a laboratory that hummed with the quiet energy of alien machinery. Tubes of luminescent fluid floated in zero-gravity tanks, rotating slowly as if caught in a cosmic ballet. Automated arms scuttled along the ceiling, handling equipment with the precision of 1,000 synchronized dancers, and every so often a small robotic assistant would lose its balance and tumble sideways, prompting a twinkle of laughter from the queen. "Those little devils are troublemakers," she said, tapping one that had just righted itself after a dramatic flip. "They insist on performing unnecessary acrobatics just to test my patience. I suppose in some ways they are like humans." The human tried not to stare at everything at once, overwhelmed by the intricate interplay of alien technology and her presence. "I have to ask," he said, gesturing toward one tank where a holographic simulation of a human embryo floated midair, "is this normal for alien science, or is this just for me?" "For you," she repeated, ears twitching. "My dear, we have never attempted this before. Human reproduction is considered highly experimental, risky. And yet we are about to attempt it because I wish to understand it, and because you, surprisingly, seem competent enough not to faint immediately." He chuckled nervously. "I have a feeling fainting wouldn't help anyone here." "No, indeed," she said, her tone teasing. "Though if you did, it would be entertaining. I might even record it for posterity." He blushed, though her humor eased some of the tension, knotting his stomach. Despite the absurdity of the situation, there was a strange rhythm developing between them. She spoke with commanding elegance, he responded with awkward sincerity, and together they navigated this unprecedented experiment like two dancers learning an entirely new choreography. "Step 1, she said, pointing to a console that displayed a series of glowing runes, "is adaptation. Your physiology must align with certain parameters before we proceed. Fortunately, I have assistance to ensure minimal discomfort, though." She glanced at a hovering medical drone which immediately froze in midair. though they often interpret minimal discomfort differently than humans do. A sudden spark shot from the drone and a small puff of harmless smoke escaped, causing the human to jump. The queen's ears twitched in amusement and she quipped, "Ah, yes, the thrill of the unknown, part of every alien procedure. You try to relax if you can manage it." Over the next hours, the human was guided through a series of exercises that blended science, technology, and the sheer unpredictability of attempting something entirely new. Nanites coursed through his bloodstream, recalibrating internal processes in real time, while holographic interfaces displayed his reactions in rainbow patterns that changed with his emotional state. Each misstep or accidental flinch prompted a ripple of laughter from the queen, who seemed to revel in the absurdity of translating human biology into an alien system. "Are you laughing at me?" he asked, swatting at a hovering diagnostic orb that had begun spinning around his head. "Perhaps," she said, ears flicking back with playful severity, "but mostly I am laughing with you, and occasionally at you. You move unpredictably and yet you are quite fascinating. Don't worry, unpredictability is expected." As the day wore on, moments of levity punctuated the intensity of the experiment. A robotic assistant delivered a perfectly measured dose of a substance intended to simulate reproductive compatibility, only to sneeze in midair, sending the liquid arcing harmlessly across the room. The queen clapped her hands in delight, her ears quivering in amusement. "Bravo, precision with flair, I say." The human groaned, but he could not help smiling at her laughter, which seemed to infuse the room with warmth. He had anticipated awkwardness, perhaps discomfort, maybe even fear, but not this combination of levity, trust, and meticulous science that bordered on art. He realized that in this strange, gravity-bending, humor-infused palace, he was not merely participating in an experiment. He was part of a shared adventure, one that defied convention and redefined what connection could mean. Toward the end of the session, the queen stepped closer, her presence commanding yet intimate. "You see, this is not merely about reproduction," she said softly, ears twitching as they leaned closer to observe his reaction. "It is about trust, about willingness, about courage in the face of uncertainty. And about humor, never forget humor. It is vital even in the most critical experiments." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I understand," he said, though he could not entirely conceal a smile. "And I think I'm ready to continue." Her lips curved into a mischievous smile. "Good, because this is only the beginning. The universe is vast, my dear human, and we are about to explore the very personal, very intimate frontier of its mysteries. And perhaps if you survive my palace and my humor, you will discover something extraordinary along the way." As they moved toward the next phase of the experiment, a small drone lost its balance again, spinning through the air and narrowly missing a console. The human ducked reflexively and the queen's laughter rang out, rich and musical, filling the room. She shook her head, ears quivering in amusement, and said, "You see, chaos and beauty often travel together. And sometimes they also trip over each other." The human laughed, the sound mingling with hers, a momentary bridge between two very different beings. In the midst of alien technology, floating holograms, and unpredictable machinery, they shared a rare understanding. That even in experiments stretching the limits of science, humor could illuminate the path, and that trust could grow, even in the most absurd circumstances. The human awoke to the soft hum of the palace, a resonance that seemed to vibrate in time with his heartbeat. The corridors were quiet now, the earlier chaos of floating holograms and misbehaving drones replaced by a serene rhythm, as though the palace itself was holding its breath for what was to come. The queen approached him, long ears flicking with subtle anticipation, her expression calm but edged with that same sharp humor that had punctuated every moment of their time together. "Sleep well?" she asked, tilting her head in mock suspicion, "or were you dreaming about robots mocking your anatomy again?" He smiled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I think the holographic mustache might have made an appearance." She chuckled, the sound like wind chimes in zero gravity. "Good, humor is essential. You have endured much, and the palace's attempts at levity were merely a warm-up for the main event. I trust you are prepared." He nodded, a mixture of nervousness and resolve tightening his chest. He had entered this palace as an ordinary human, overwhelmed by alien grandeur and impossible technology. Now, standing before her, he realized that every stumble, every burst of laughter, every awkward misfire of a drone had taught him something vital. Courage is not absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is trust. And connection can form in the most extraordinary and unexpected places. They moved into the central chamber, a space where light and gravity twisted in patterns that made it feel like the room itself was breathing. Floating platforms hovered silently, and the air shimmered with the faint glow of nanites tracing invisible paths, preparing the environment for the final experiment. The queen's eyes met his, long ears tilting forward, a subtle smile playing on her lips. Now, she said softly, we begin in earnest. But remember, this is not merely biology. It is trust, partnership, and the willingness to face the unknown together. And a touch of humor, if possible, I insist. He laughed quietly. I think I can manage that, as long as you don't throw in any surprise gravity shifts without warning. Never, she replied, her ears flicking in mock offense. Well, perhaps a minor one for dramatic effect. The first moments were awkward, a tangle of nerves and mechanical precision. Nanites adjusted and monitored physiological alignment, holographic readouts hovered in the air, and robotic assistants hovered like overzealous spectators. Every misstep or accidental flinch drew a flicker of amusement from the queen, who, despite her regal composure, occasionally whispered playful admonitions. Careful, human, or the gravity field might think you are a feather. As the experiment progressed, laughter and tenderness intertwined with the careful application of alien science. He realized, with a mix of astonishment and humility, that the queen's wish was not merely an exotic curiosity. It was a profound act of trust, a bridge between species, cultures, and lifetimes. Each moment of humor, each shared glance strengthened that bridge, and the palace, once intimidating, now felt like a sanctuary for this rare communion. Time seemed to stretch, minutes dissolving into hours as the human and the queen navigated the complex orchestration of biology, technology, and intimacy. She guided him with patience and wit, her long ears twitching with each new adjustment, every miscalculation greeted with a quip or a laugh. In turn, he responded with sincerity, attentiveness, and a courage he hadn't realized he possessed. Together, they moved through the experiment like dancers in a choreography neither had rehearsed, but both had imagined perfectly. Finally, as the simulated system stabilized, a soft glow suffused the chamber, signaling success. The floating holograms converged into a pattern that symbolized alignment, compatibility, and a singular moment of connection. The human exhaled, a mixture of relief, awe, and disbelief, while the queen's ears quivered in satisfaction. See, she said, voice gentle now touched with emotion. All of this, every laugh, every misstep, every absurdity, it was never just about procedure. It was about connection. It was about sharing something that cannot be measured in metrics or charts. You have changed, human. You have learned to trust the unfamiliar, to embrace vulnerability, and to find humor in the most extraordinary circumstances. He looked at her, a smile breaking across his face. And you, he asked, have you changed too? Her eyes softened. Perhaps. I have always known the value of curiosity, but this taught me about courage and intimacy in a new way. Even a queen must sometimes take a risk to understand life fully. And sometimes that risk is laughing at oneself and allowing another to see you entirely. They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the palace a gentle accompaniment, as the implications of their shared experiment settled over them. The human felt a profound shift within himself, fear tempered by understanding, awkwardness transformed into trust, and isolation replaced by connection. The queen, too, seemed lighter, as if the act of entrusting herself to another had lifted a weight she had borne alone for centuries. Shall we prepare for the surgery now? He asked with a wry grin, sensing that a final touch of humor was in order. She tilted her head, ears flicking with mock severity. Do you truly think I would face my operation without a final prank or two? No, we must proceed with dignity and at least 3 minor gravitational surprises. He laughed, the sound mingling with hers, echoing through the chamber like a bridge between two worlds. In that laughter, he understood that their journey had been about far more than biology or experimentation. It was about trust, courage, intimacy, and the simple, irreducible joy of connection.